Mark chapter 3 today. Mark chapter 3. If you're new or you're just joining us, we have started a series in the book of Mark. Mark is one of the four Gospels that tells the story of Jesus in its entirety. And the reason I think we move forward unapologetically with such conviction on this study, even though by I think by the measurements of this world, it's kind of a brave undertaking. And time and time again, people tell me, oh, well, high schoolers, they're not going to be able to track with you through such a long series. Or what if they miss a week, then they're going to miss out. No, that's not the case. Okay, so we are always going to want to push you further and treat you more like adults than the world around you. And I just found, like, when you set a bar this low, whenever you set a bar any length, like any height, you always clear it just barely, right? It's like when you're playing a 4-year-old in basketball, you might beat him, but you're not going to, like, annihilate him, right? And the level that you're going to play it is going to be much lower. Whatever it takes, if you really want to win, you do whatever it takes to win, but it's not going to be crazy. Now, if you're playing like an NBA player, you're going to have a lot more effort and a lot more exertion. But however high the bar is, we always clear it by like 1 inch. Okay, so we just decided a long time ago in 11:12, what if we set the bar ridiculously high for this group of people? What if we set it higher than what the rest of the world expects of them? What we found is y'all jump it like no one's biz. So why would we set the bar right here when you're capable of here, but no one sets a bar here and then jumps this high? That just doesn't happen. Okay? It's like, hey, can you jump over this thing? Yeah, got it, nailed it, right? That's like, that was so much. Like, relax, kid. Right? If it's right here, it's like the limbo. When you're doing the limbo and the bar's right here, no one goes, it's like, bro, just, somebody can walk right underneath it. Okay, there's no need to, like, exert yourself. So if you're new here, you're like, wow, this is hard. Good. Like, that's kind of what we want to be. Like, church, I think historically we've tried to appease people so much. We've tried to be so culturally palatable that I think a lot of the times church has become what it wasn't meant to be, which is kind of this holy huddle of fun-filled, happy, where we stop each other saying like, yay, we're awesome. But I don't think that's what the Bible was meant. It says the Bible is like a double-edged sword, able to cut muscle from flesh. In other words, when we read the Bible, it should teach us something new about ourselves and refine something old in us. It should challenge us and push us and change us. That's how we should approach Scripture. God, what do you want to make me into? Not, God, what kind of joy do you have for me in these pages every day? It's, God, what will you make me, not what will you give me? So we've kind of started down this path of tackling a whole book of the Bible, which is a story of Jesus. The reason we think it's so important to read the story of Jesus, whether you're secular or Christian or whatever you are in between, is there's something that's really not arguable, which is that the central point of human history is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Like, if you are a pronounced atheist, I think it's Lawrence Krauss who said it. He said, there is no doubt that the pivot point of human history is Jesus Christ. Now, he's an atheist. He doesn't believe that Jesus is who he said he was, but he says if you look at the historical timeline, there's nothing that was more important than that. And it got me thinking, why are we studying this? Why are we reading this? Again, whether you're a Christian or secular alike, you got to come to one conclusion is, why are we still talking about this guy? What is it about him that has us still talking about him? And no matter what cultural moment you've lived in historically, we all believe that there's certain things that happen in your lifetime that will never stop. There's certain ideas and principles that we now continue on that. Like, let me give you an example. When I was probably 7, a man named Timothy McVeigh made a bomb and he blew up the Oklahoma City Mira Federal Building, which was about 60 miles away from where I lived in Oklahoma. And I remember I turned on the news and my teachers were afraid. We had to go on like lockdown. It was the worst domestic terrorist attack on U.S. soil ever. And it was nuts. Like, it's all anyone talked about. If you turned on your TV in the state of Oklahoma, for about 3 months after that, it was all Oklahoma City, search and rescue efforts, trial of Timothy McVeigh. He was eventually executed, but it was all anyone talked about. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if the news will ever stop talking about the Oklahoma City bombing. Because in your cultural moment or in your cultural second, in your millisecond, it's just, this is all encompassing. But nothing really outlives its kind of own subjected demeanor, Like, it kind of has its place in history, and then it stops there. I remember being in a carpool when I was a kid, and and NSYNC came out with their self-titled debut album, and they had a Disney Channel original concert series concert where they first kind of made their appearance on the screen. And it was weird. No one knew what NSYNC was, and then overnight, it was crazy. Everyone was like, I used to call in for tickets to the local radio station, like, the 11th caller is going to get free tickets to NSYNC. And my brother and I, we would call in, we wanted those tickets so bad. And if you were cool that day, you got to be Justin Timberlake. And if you were dumb that day, you had to be Joey Fatone. And it was like, we literally did this every day. And then Titanic came out. And then Titanic was like this thing where, you guys remember Alive in Titanic. I'm dating myself. But I'm not dating myself. It means you're showing how old you are. I'm not dating myself. That would be a weird concept. But then Titanic came out, and we used to play trivia games where you would listen to 4 seconds of the Titanic soundtrack, and then you'd have to guess which part of the movie it was in based on the score of that particular track. So you'd hear dum bum ba-dum bum bum. You're like, oh, that's when Rose is telling her family that she doesn't want to be around them anymore. And that was the trivia game we used to play. And we knew everything about it. We knew the director, we knew the budget, we knew everything. We started doing studies on Titanic and how it sank and all this. And it was I just remember thinking in all those different moments that nothing's ever, we will never stop talking about Titanic. We will never stop talking about NSYNC. And you go, well, NSYNC is still awesome. You can name 3 songs by NSYNC, maybe. What's Chris's last name from NSYNC? Anyone know? What was it? Do you know it? No, what'd you say? What's last name? Chris from NSYNC. What's his last name? What about JC? What's his last name? Does anyone know the 5th guy's name at all? Lance Bass, JC Chazet, Joey Fatone, Justin Timberlake. You know him? Okay, cool. But there's going to become a day where we roll around and go, oh, Justin Timberlake. Where the generation after you is going to go, Justin what? Justin who? And they're going to go, oh, it's like in my mirror. And they go, oh, yeah, that one-hit wonder guy. One-hit wonder. He was a revolution. Right? And just no one's going to care. And I remember where I was sitting on September 11, 2001. I remember sitting in my armchair, my dad in our house, and I was in junior high, and I had a long T-shirt on because I had just woken up, and I had one of my dad's long T-shirts on, and then just underwear because that's what I wore to bed when I was a kid. And you know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. So I remember sitting in the chair, and I'd pulled my legs up to my chest, and I had put the shirt over my legs to create my own little cocoon of safety and solitude. But I remember my dad, he sat on the armchair next to me, and he just said, just pay attention. He said, the world will never be the same after this. And it's true, how many 4,000 people were killed in that day between the different attacks, and just everything's been different since then. But, what did you do on the 10th anniversary of September 11th? Did you guys have, a day of silence in your house? Did you have a memoriam? Anyone know what the guy's name was that flew the plane into the building? The more famous one? No? Does anyone know what province in Afghanistan Al-Qaeda was existing at the time that we went and attacked almost immediately after? Is it weird? It's just even when I was in junior high, there were these things I thought to myself, man, we will never stop talking about September 11th. And the 10th anniversary, I was sitting in my dorm room just crying, but no one else cared. And I'm a history nut. I love that kind of junk. But everyone else was walking around their normal day. And then now, on September 11th, you know what we do? We go, hey, it's September 11th. Whoa, crazy. And we just keep going. And then you've got this Jewish rabbi who didn't kill anyone. He wasn't a terrorist. He preached a new message of love. He was crucified by the Roman guard, and then people claim to have seen him again, and you and I are sitting in a Christian church 2,000 years later. You at least have your interest piqued enough to find out who this guy was. Maybe you don't believe that he was God, that's fine. But you owe it to yourself to go, why is our cultural moment not squashing this dude? How come 4,000 years before he showed up on the scene, people were writing about him, and now 2,000 years after, people can't stop singing, writing, talking, and gathering about him? What the heck? That's what we kind of want to dive into. who is this most famous person in the history of mankind. Another time, chapter 3, Jesus went to the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. So the Pharisees were known as the separated ones, or the holier ones. It's like Jesus' number one enemy, were these people. And they're his enemy because they didn't think that Jesus needed to die, because they thought that they were perfect. So Jesus really wanted them to understand, no, you need God, you need help, you need salvation, but they didn't think that they did. So this is kind of their MO was God would give them a law, but the law would be to protect them, right? And then they would draw lines around the law, and then they would create like a letter of the law, even though God meant for it to be a spirit of the law. So one of the laws that God gave to his people back in the Old Testament is, I want you to take a day every week, and I want you to just rest. What's God trying to squash when he tells people, I want you to take a day and I want you to rest? What would be a loving father's reason to giving his children a day to rest? What would be his reason? A loving father, what's his reason? Yeah, exactly. If your kids are going to work themselves to death and they're going to delay gratification, they're going to have a strong work ethic, if they never stop and smell the rose, they never stop and dive into their family and engage with their God, they're just going to live and work to die. So Jesus goes, look, why reap the fruit of your harvest to provide for a family that you don't know? How stupid would that be? So take a day off every week where, look, don't work. So the spirit of God's law is, I want you to love your family. I want you to relax. I want you to delight in me. I want you to take a day off where you're not working. And then the Pharisees come in and they go, well, that's the spirit of the law, but now we're going to write a letter to it. Because people started asking the very Einstein questions of like, well, what's work? And Jesus goes, look, I don't need to define work for you. I want you to take a day of rest. And the Pharisees go, well, if you're not going to define work, then we are. You can't push a button. You can't tie a knot. You can't make food. You can't walk a certain number of steps. You can't solve an equation. If you are bleeding, all you can do is stop the bleeding. You can't apply ointment or antiseptic to it because that's considered work. So they started making these stupid rules on what work was. So now you're walking around on Sabbath, which was meant in God's spirit to give us rest, and people were going, 1, 2, 3, 4, I only got 2 steps left. Where should I go? People would literally on Sabbath get stuck in the middle of the street because they miscounted their steps, and they would go, crap. So they would get baked by the sun. They would sit out in Middle Eastern heat, and they went, good thing God gave us a day of rest so I could sit out here in the blistering sun. And it became something that, and then Jesus came, and he came to like abolish all that and went, why do you guys think I made the Sabbath in the first place? And they go, what do you mean you? And he goes, oh, by the way, I am that God. I am Lord of the Sabbath. And I did not create the Sabbath for you fools to make a new rule around them. Like imagine, what's the spirit of the law of the speed limit on a highway? What's the spirit of it? Like what's the loving notion behind a speed limit for us as people? To keep you safe, right? If some bozo is in a Ferrari going like 220 and you are in the carpool lane and he comes up behind you, you might slam on your brakes, you might freak out, you might try to swerve and miss him. So the law, the spirit of it says, everyone, don't travel much past this pace because it can be unsafe. Ironically, if you're on the freeway in a lot of places and you're going 55 in the left lane, you become a safety hazard. Even though that's the letter of the law is 55, you might even get pulled over and you go like, you got to keep with the flow of traffic though. Because the spirit of the law is don't go 99 miles an hour everywhere that you go. But the letter of the spirit of the law is to keep you safe. But what the Pharisees would do is they would come, they would look at that and they would go, well, if it's 55, let's imagine you're going 55 and then you're not paying attention, you accidentally go 56, then you'd be breaking the law. So we are so holy, we're not even going to go 50 miles an hour. And then this other group of Pharisees would go, oh, you guys are going 50? Well, I could still imagine a scenario where you're going 50 and you accidentally go 56. So we're not even going to go 40 miles an hour. And the next group would be like, oh, yeah? Well, we're not even going 30 miles an hour. And like, well, we're so holy, we're not even going to go 5 miles an hour. And now it's like, but now the whole point of driving is pointless. Now you're sitting in your car going, I really showed them. It'll be another 3 days till we get to Chick-fil-A, right? It's like, now you're like, and so Jesus came and he's like face palming constantly, like, you freaking thought this was the reason I came? You thought I gave you a law so you could judge everyone against it and go, ugh, shame on you. He goes, like, I gave it, a loving father gave his children a loving set of rules to say, if you want to experience the best life possible, it's probably better you don't sleep around with each other's wives and husbands. And so the Pharisees would come and go, well, not only don't sleep with them, don't even look at them. And Jesus goes, no, stop. Stop making new rules. We can all go. Lives work better when husbands and wives are faithful to one another, right? None of us go, well, my parents cheated and it's been a lot better since then. I love having 2 Christmases and having to fight against who takes who to court at what time and judging behind each other's backs. That's fun for me. So you have a loving father going, like, if you want to love each other, like, don't commit adultery. And the Pharisees come in and go, well, when you say adultery, if a man speaks to a woman, then it's to be considered sin. And Jesus just goes, look, this is so dumb. So he walks in, there's a man with a shriveled hand. So by nature, he's incapable of extending his hand, whether it's some kind of like a torsion or a muscular dystrophy or whatever it might be. He can't extend his hand, so he's got a shriveled hand right here. So Jesus walks up to him and he says, the people are like, he says to the man, stand up in front of everyone. Then Jesus asked them, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill it? So as soon as he tells this man with a shriveled hand to stand up. Jesus has a history of healing people. Now the Pharisees are going, you better not heal on the Sabbath because that's considered work. And we're not allowed to work. So Jesus goes, stand up, which is also unlawful. Stand up. And then Jesus hears what they're thinking and he says, are you guys literally going to make an argument that there's a bad day for someone to experience healing? You think there's a bad day for someone to experience new life like this? Is that what your argument is? And then it says they fell silent. They remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. Which, the nature of someone's shriveled hand means that they can't do that. If they could stretch it out, it wouldn't be a shriveled hand. But Jesus says, in faith, I want you to begin to extend it and just see how I'm going to follow through. And the man is able to extend his hand completely, and his hand is completely healed. And so Jesus he's creating this tension again. It's the tension of the book of Mark. You got to kill me or you got to crown me. But I haven't given you a third option. Crucify me or crown me. Kill me or crown me. I'm not going to be gentle enough to just kind of walk by as some kind of intelligent, wise shaman. But I'm also going to be radical enough that if you don't do something about it, I'm going to start a revolution. So you need to kill me as a revolutionary, or you're going to have to say that, well, maybe this shaman is who he said it was, and now you crown me as king of everything because I am God. But you have no third option. So he continues to create this tension. He said, I want you to stretch out your hand. Now imagine for this man who has a shriveled hand, you would probably spend the majority of your time having like inside some kind of a cloak. Don't you love like the heart of Jesus? He's like, you've got a strong hand. Jesus could have said, keep your hand in your cloak. It's healed. Now take it out. But what does he want this man to do? He wants this man to extend himself. He wants this man to experience vulnerability. He says, excuse me, shriveled hand man? He doesn't call him that, but he says, I want you to lead with the place of the most vulnerability. Get out the hand that you're embarrassed by, and let me show how I'm going to replace your embarrassment with glory. Let me show you how I'm going to replace your shame with truth, how I'm going to replace your brokenness with healing. But it's predicated on the man being willing to go, here's my shame, and it's been made new. I love how he didn't say, reach out your good hand, or keep your hand in your pocket. He said, it's okay. I'm here. Extend your shriveled hand. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to a lake. Then the next story, there's this demon-possessed guy that's going to come around him and try to like come in on all sides. Then it says that there's these Pharisees and this group of Romans and this group of Jews who are plotting now to kill Jesus. So he's kind of got everyone pressing in on all sides that are attempting to kill him. And then it says this, verse 13. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He's going to appoint 12 people that that might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and have authority to drive out demons. The very next story is it's going to say that Jesus was so busy that he didn't have time to eat anymore. Crowds were so much around him and his schedule was so impacted, he didn't have time to eat. The very next verse says, then his family came and tried to call him out of ministry. He said, Jesus, you're out of your mind. And in the middle of all this chaos and all these trials and all this tribulation and all this hardship and difficulty and pressure and, enemies plotting against you and people thinking that you aren't who they thought you wanted to be and your family's in great distress and your schedule is impacted, what happens in the middle of this story? Jesus decides that he's going to put a group of people around him that he's going to do life with. It's ironic that it fell in this section, but this is my kind of unapologetic plug for life groups. And it's based on a simple notion. I spent a lot of time trying to convince people that life groups are important. Why am I doing that? Let me just ask you a simple question. What's most important to you in your life? You don't need to answer out loud. But actually do like an internal championship in your head. Maybe you have 8 contenders and then put them up against each other. So you got like popularity and sports right here. And so put a little competition there. Would I rather be popular or athletic? I'd rather be popular. And then the next battle, these two people you might have like, I want to be wealthy or I want to be well respected in my family. So you have like this like internal championship, and eventually you're gonna have to ask some big questions like, if I had to guess, what's more important to me? My reputation or my future wealth and success? Because that'll dictate how you make some answers. Maybe you go to a college where all your friends are going, or you go to a college where you're going to be able to get a great degree and you can't have both. You have to make a decision. It's going to dictate your life. Now, what happens when we throw God in that mix? Does he make your top 8 at all? And if he does, at what point does he get snuffed out in that competition? It's pretty horrifying when you start thinking about that. Like maybe you put him up against a weak opponent round 1. Like God or huge muscles. Maybe huge muscles are important to you. But maybe that one, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you're like, no, I'd rather have God than huge muscles. But then you've got like your girlfriend on the other side, and you're going, oh no. I can see something happening. And then all of a sudden, there's 2 left standing. Would you rather have the guarantee that the girl that you like or the girl that you are in love with is with you forever? Or you lose her completely and you follow God and what he wants for your life? What wins that competition? It doesn't mean that if we follow God, he's going to say, well, everyone's got to break up with their girlfriend or boyfriend. That's not the case. But honestly, ask the question of yourself, what if it was required? What if he or she said, it's time to choose? This church thing you're doing is stupid. We're not doing another night a week where you're out in your small groups or your life groups. Okay? I hate this whole moral thing. It would just be easier if we didn't have all that guilt that came along with Jesus. We could sleep together whenever we wanted. We could hook up however we wanted. We could round the bases twice a night. It wouldn't even matter to us anymore. Why can't we just do that? And the championship is set. Who's going to win? And so maybe you go like, no, I'm pretty convinced that given all the things of this world, all the possible relationships, God is most important. But I'll bet you one thing, because I know it's true of my life. I could find a paper trail in your life of why the second place is second place in your championship, but I probably couldn't figure out a paper trail of why God is first place. Here's what I mean by that. If second place in my life is sports, growing up it was for me. Sports was like king of my life. But I would profess that God was king of my life. But when it came down to it, sports always won. Now I look back and I go, but freaking why? Did I get a scholarship? Yes. And then I lost it. because I got injured. Something you know about your body, it's in decline. But everything about my life, like at some point I would have said, no, God is more important than Paige. But when I was trying to court her and date her, if you looked at my checkbook, that's not a thing anymore. If you looked at my credit card statement, if you looked at the miles driven on my car, if you looked at the time spent every day, if you looked at my communication, if you looked at my text messages, if you looked at everything that was important to me in my life, and I told you, I said, look at all this data, now tell me what's most important to me. God wouldn't have been in my top 50. So in any other relationship, it would make no sense if I said my wife behind God is number 2 in my life. And yet, when you look at everything about who I am, there is no reminiscence. There's nothing even smacks of Paige. Nothing even has a point to Paige. You would probably go, I don't think she's actually important to you. When you decide to spend your time, talent, energy, money, everything else like that, none of it revolves around Paige. When you have a free hour, you go away from her. When you have a vacation, you leave her. When you are able to schedule your day, you schedule it with your friends more than you do her. I'm not quite sure this relationship means anything to you. I think that's where we kind of get stuck sometimes, is we think to ourselves, the least important part of your body to have a conviction of following Jesus is your mouth. Does that make sense? But for some of us, it's the only part that actually does it. God is number 1 in my life. Your shoes, things a little bit further north, where you spend your money, your time, everything else disagrees with you, but your mouth is the only thing saying that. But if I stood up in front of you and I said, I don't drink, while chugging back 2 Coors Lights, do you believe that I don't drink? No. Why? Because I'm drinking. Even if I was like, no, I freaking swear I don't drink. No, I even know the songs. I'll sing you a song about how much I don't drink. None of it matters. Because as soon as what I do contradicts what I say, we throw out what people say. I'm a vegan. What are you eating? Chick-fil-A. No, you're not. No, like I really, really want to be a vegan. Well, you got to stop eating meat. I don't think so. Well, you're not a vegan. I can be both. I met a person one time who was both. No, you didn't. But this is the argument we make. I don't really need to be in community to be a Christian. Here's who you're pushing back against. You might go like, well, the church said I need to be in community. No, that's not what I said. But the idea of being a Christian, a Christian, means that we are mathetas. We talked about it week 1. A part of his Talmudim. We are a follower of him. We say, I want to be like you. That's what it means to be a Christian. I want to be like Christ. Christ, in the middle of his trial, when he's calling people to vulnerability, when everything's pressing around him, when he's got opposition on all sides, when people are chanting, let's kill this man, what does he take the time to do? He literally joins a small group. Like that's his response to the oppression around him. That's his response to enemies. That's his response to hardship, his response to trial. And if anyone in the history of mankind could have done life on his own in a monastic, sedentary lifestyle, it would have been Jesus. And yet he sits here and goes, I need 12. Give me 12. You. Follow me. Let's do life together. And let me make a simple pitch to you. If something is good enough for the man who makes the whole world spin and float, it's got to be sufficient for us. If it was important enough for the God of the universe when he became man to participate in, we really don't have a leg to stand on to say, it's not really my cup, not really my thing. Or I'm pretty sure I can stand firm inside of what I'm doing without a small group, or without a group around me, or without accountability, or without people pouring into my life. It's, at some point, the deception turns into foolishness. Like I think whenever we do something, we go, well, I know God called me to do it. I know that Jesus did it himself, but I think I'm a little bit more advanced in my spiritual walk than him. That's called blasphemy. That is to put yourself in the position of godship. Now, look, some of you are going to run up against it. Some of you, your parents won't let you. But for the vast majority of us, we are in a growth group because we want to be, not because we have to be. 1 out of 4 of you if there's 130 of you in the room right now, 120 of you in the room right now, I don't know the number, but if there's 120 of you in the room right now, let's round down so we can make an even number. If there's 100 of you in the room right now, 25 of you will die not knowing Jesus. That's the odds. You can pick which 25, but I'll guarantee you one thing, no one raises their hand as part of the 25. 25 of you will die not knowing Jesus and will spend forever separated with him in eternity. How many of you go, that's probably me? It's difficult, right? Very few of us would go, and yet the odds say a quarter of you that will happen. In fact, those are conservative numbers. If we went the more liberal way, it'd probably be around 40% of you, which means 40 of you would have to raise your hand. But none of us sitting here go, it's me. We all go, oh, well, where's the 40? Well, which 40? I'll tell you which 40. It's the 40 who think that these essential principles of walking with Christ don't apply to them. That's it. That's the easiest separation I can make. It's the people who go, why can't we just participate in cultural Christianity? Why can't it just be enough? I mean, I'm giving him an hour a week. Isn't that enough? There is no relationship or level of importance. Like, imagine if you were like, man, soccer is my life. It's your life? What do you mean? Well, on Sundays, I spend an hour watching soccer. It's just my life. What about on Monday? What about on Monday? What do you do with soccer on Monday? Nothing. Tuesday? Nothing. Stop. Don't go day by day, man. I told you. On Sunday, I watch it for an hour. Back up. Don't judge me. If I said it's important in my life, then I say it's important in my life. If it's the number one thing in my life, it's the number one thing in my life. You gave it an hour a week? You place anything in terms of God, and we laugh at it. And when it comes to God, we go like, it should be sufficient. You have 167 hours a week where the rest of the world is telling you who you shouldn't be. And you think it's going to be counteracted by 1 hour a week in a large group setting of you being told who you ought to be, of who you are in Christ? And it's not just lip service. I'm in 2 small groups. That's how unholy I am. I need it twice. And it's not about reaching a level of spiritual maturity, then you can drop out of it. Like, I need it in my life now more than ever. So this is kind of my shameless plug. And I just realized I can't love you and not push you to join a growth group. I just can't. If that is like one of the number one indicators to whether you finish high school and finish college knowing Jesus, then I can't claim to love you and have another route that you don't participate in weekly small groups. I just don't have one. If you don't, does it make you less of a person? Heck no, tech no. Well, if you don't, are you not welcome here? Absolutely not. You're totally welcome here. We love you. We love that you're here. I'm just trying to be the future version of you that says, who's going to be the 40? Sometimes the stakes are too high to go, I'll roll the dice. I mean, just think about that. You roll a 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're going to fall away from Jesus. You roll a 5 or a 6, you're going to stick with him. Wouldn't you at any point want to hedge your bets in that other direction? And if it's proven that growth groups hedge that bet, what if they move it to 1 or 2 versus 3, 4, 5, and 6? Are you more comfortable with that dice roll? What about if it's 1 is falling away and 2 through 6, that's a much more comfortable dice roll? That's what we do as Christians. What we say is, I want to build every obstacle in my life between me and where I don't want to become and who I don't want to become. And if growth groups is one of those essential obstacles, then build it. You got to bet on yourself. Like I said, the first day of everything is uncomfortable. The first 2 weeks of everything is going to be uncomfortable. But if something was really important to you, you wouldn't let one thing stand in your way. And look who Jesus called to his side. Judas Iscariot, the one who's going to betray him for 30 pieces of silver, who betrays him with a kiss, who's going to get him killed. He calls him to his growth group too. And you go, well, my growth group has to be everyone that I agree with. Not in the sense of if it's considered actually to be for your growth. Sometimes in a small group, the best thing you can have is someone who's in opposition to you in your growth group or in your life group. Why? Because they're going to produce more growth in you than anyone else. Because every week you're going to have to go, I got to bite my tongue. I got to love them like Jesus. Lovable people are not difficult to love. The unlovable ones are the ones that he came for. Lost souls are the only ones worth fighting for. Love means something when effortlessness ends, which means love displays itself in its entirety when something is effortful, when it's difficult, when it's not easy, when it's not simple. That's when love can really shine. So you being a group of everyone that you completely agree with all the time is never going to give you the opportunity to let your love shine, because it's not love. It's cathexis. It's affection. It's emotion. Love begins when effortlessness ends. It's when there's somebody in growth group that you can't stand. But you come back week after week going, how can I turn you into someone who looks more like Jesus, and in the process, me as well? And if it's good enough for the King of everything, I think it's got to be good enough for us. Let's pray. Jesus, when you came down, you gave us a great model that sometimes growth groups are going to require, or small group life groups are going to require vulnerability. And in this one story, you say, I want you to reach out your shriveled hand. I want you to practice vulnerability. What an interesting concept that you, our God, practices in Scripture, of calling us out of our charade and out of our facade and our pretense. And you're saying, look, what would it look like to get in a group where you extend the part of you don't want shown? What would it look like for you to be in a group where the trial is coming, but your friends group is secure? And that can build relationships that literally will last for the rest of our lives. Would you give us the bravery not to go in halfway, but to make a strong commitment? And may we all always have that kind of eternity perspective on our lives. Not what's going to be best for me today or what benefits me most tomorrow. But what about the 60, 70, 80-year-old version of ourselves? Or beyond, even after we die? Would you give us the perspective to make decisions to set that person up for success, not today's person up for success? In your name we pray. Amen.